Hello, this is H.G. Tudor, and this is part 3 to the series of Ask H.G. Tudor. The first question comes from Sheila. She explains, "My question is for those of us who have a loved one involved with a narcissist. My son has been dating a narcissist for almost 4 years, and in spite of pointing out the red flags and telltale signs, he stays with her. That said, how should we deal with her? I've limited all contact and communication. She uses this against me, putting my son in a position to choose her or his family. So far, he's managed to walk a tightrope, but it's taking its toll." Well, Sheila, in such a situation, you have to understand that from early on, it is highly likely that the narcissist will have recognized that you either realized there was something wrong in the relationship, that you realized there was something not quite right about the narcissist, or something else which caused them to label you as a potential troublemaker. We are rather attuned at identifying those that are with us and those that are against us. This is a consequence of our black and white thinking. Accordingly, when we have an intimate primary source, we want their family and friends to provide us with positive fuel and effectively be on side. Indeed, we will look to recruit one or more as lieutenants for us and cause certain of them to become part of our coterie. If we perceive someone to be difficult, we will look to isolate them, and we will smear them to our primary source. The problem that the isolated relative has is that, of course, this will be done during the seduction. So the victim thinks that we are wonderful. They become addicted to us in the normal way through love bombing, etc. And where you have a choice of, do you pick the person that is calling you wonderful, that is providing you with amazing sex, that is making your life light up, or one of your relatives who you may not see very often, it is unsurprising that the victim will always choose the narcissist over the family member. Of course, when things start to go wrong, even if you had pointed out that this was likely to happen, or that you are pointing out to the victim that the narcissist is causing problems, either in the wider family circle, social circle, or even just for the victim, him or herself, the difficulty you'll face is that the victim is, of course, caught up in it all. They will be trying to get through their day without causing an eruption. They will be treading on eggshells. The last thing that they need is a member of their family pointing out to them things that they do not really want to believe. In some instances, they will feel a sense of shame because they recognize that something is wrong, but they do not want to admit it. In other instances, they regard it as a temporary blip, and they will be looking to get back to the golden period. Therefore, they will not want to hear from somebody saying, your girlfriend is a problem. They will be brainwashed by what has gone on, and of course, similarly, if they live together or perhaps have children together, the victim will be trying to keep the family unit in place, and it is easier to sacrifice a friend or a family member than it is to walk away from the narcissist. That is the nature of the beast. And as you identify, she is putting your son in a position of choosing her or the family. This is what we always do. And invariably, we succeed in getting them to choose us. What can you do? She has already identified you as black. Therefore, it should not cause you any problem in terms of not providing her with fuel. Indeed, if you do not provide her with fuel, you limit your contact with her. And even if you behave in a way that will wound her, she is likely to start to show her true colours. This means that other family members will see this, and eventually, although it may take some time, your son will realise what is going on. If you keep telling him what she is and trying to cause him to change his mind, you will not succeed. Most victims, although admittedly not all, but most, will not listen. They're not able to listen because of the effects of what we have done to them. Moreover, people don't like to be told how to think. What you have to do is to allow time to take its course and allow her to reveal her true colours in terms of the eruptions, where you remain pleasant and supportive towards your son. Eventually, he will wake up. It might be that he chooses her over you before this happens, or he may decide earlier. The simple fact is, you are going to have to bide your time. Trying to smear her is likely to work against you because your son is so embedded with her. Therefore, you need to allow time to pass, to let him reach his own conclusions, allow him to see her for what she is, and then when this happens, you will then have a much more receptive response from him by explaining precisely what she is and why she is behaving that way. Accordingly, bide your time, give her enough rope, and then be there to catch your son when the fallout occurs. Our next question comes from B in Florida, the United States of America. Why does the narcissist not graduate from lesser to mid-range to greater? The man I was with was definitely a lesser, owing to what I have learned from your videos, but he had some characteristics of the mid-range and the greater at times. The simple fact is that the school of narcissists that an individual belongs to is determined effectively by cognitive function, awareness, and their evolution as a narcissist. The lesser and mid-range do not know what they are, the greater does. One does not move from lesser to mid-range, or from mid-range to greater, and vice versa. It is established. There are, of course, subdivisions within each of those three schools. But there is no graduation because it is set from when the narcissist is created as to their cognitive function and level of awareness. And that does not alter. Yes, there may be a honing of skills, there may be a situation where a narcissist becomes more effective, but they will not move out of that school. In terms of characteristics, like any individual, people are made up of different segments and shards. Accordingly, you may have somebody who shows some mid-range traits. For example, they have a degree of charm about them, but they show a lot of lesser traits in that they lose their temper, that they use physical violence, for instance. And therefore, the lesser traits outweigh those of the mid-range, which means that they fall within the lesser school. Sometimes an individual may be moving towards mid-range and therefore might be regarded as being on the cusp of the two schools. It is the case that you will notice traits that come from each school, but overall, and looking at it in the round, there is always an overriding categorization that is relevant to the particular narcissist. So do not think that a person alternates between being a lesser, a mid-range, and a greater. That does not happen. All it is that you might be seeing particular traits, and they are firmly within a particular school. The next question comes from Beth from the United States of America. She writes, I'm aware of cycles of when my narcissist is going to abandon me, leave me, has somewhere and someone else to live with, but never follows through with his threats. I find myself needing the recovery from the threats, but it is as though he forgets the threat of abandonment. I've decided to escape my relationship. How do I break free from this cycle? What is happening here, Beth, is that the narcissist uses the threat of abandonment for the purposes of drawing fuel from you. I assume you are the primary source for your narcissist, and as a consequence it is likely that he has an intimate partner secondary source as well, which he is using to triangulate with you. He has in place somewhere to go, someone else to turn to, who he may make his new primary source, and he dangles this in front of you. He does this to test the level of control he has over you. He does this to draw fuel from you. And it is evident that you respond in a way that pleases him, whereby you give him additional fuel, that he is able to see that he has you under his control, and that is why he does not carry through with the threat of abandonment. It may also be the case that whilst he is devaluing you, the other person that he has, he does not regard as appropriate to be his intimate partner primary source yet. And that, combined with the fuel that you continue to provide, means that he is not ready to discard you. In terms of breaking free from this cycle, the obvious route is to go no contact. You need to prepare for this. And my book, Getting Out, will establish for you lots of considerations you should have regard to in terms of what to prepare and what to expect. I recommend that you read this. You then ought to also read Escape and No Contact, as this will direct you to the steps that you need to take to establish no contact and to establish it so that it is effective and so that you know what will happen in terms of the narcissistic dynamic. There is nobody better than a narcissist, and one that is aware, in the way that I am, to tell you what we will do when you try to impose no contact on us. No contact is the answer, and as a consequence, you need to make suitable preparation for this so that it does not fail, be determined, and when you decide to do it, action it. Look to enlist help from others. Your narcissist, of course, may well try to isolate you from those of your supporters. You need to connect with them in a method whereby your narcissist does not know that you are doing so. You will need to be covert in your preparations. You will need to be sure about who you can trust. And then when you decide to make the break for the border, you see it through without hesitation and without looking over your shoulder. A question from Vilami from Finland. Hello HG. After 5 years of blaming myself, I finally learned about narcissistic abuse, and I really want to open up to someone about my experience. But when I try talking to my common friends about it, most of them can't understand. They tell me not to speak about it and tell me to consider the narcissist's point of view, which of course I have been doing way too much for years, and I'm trying to finally break free, but they make it worse again. I can't keep this forever inside of me. What do I do? Well, Vilami, it is not uncommon for people to respond in this fashion. Chief amongst the reasons is that most people want a quiet life. They don't want aggravation, they don't want drama, and therefore what you explain to them causes a disruption. It is also borne out of the fact that unless you've been through the narcissistic dynamic yourself, people just do not understand what it is like. They probably think that you exaggerate things. They're probably tired of hearing you talk about it. It will make them feel uncomfortable, particularly since you're speaking to a mutual group of friends. And therefore, what you're actually causing them to do is you're forcing them to try and make a choice as to whether they like you and believe you or whether they like the narcissist. People are selfish. They don't want to be told how to think. They don't want to have to make that choice. It makes life difficult for them. Therefore, when you keep talking about it, it makes them feel uncomfortable because you're trying to split their loyalties. I appreciate that you will not be doing that on purpose and you just want somebody to talk to. However, that is the way that it will come across. You will also be dealing with people who are effectively brainwashed in favour of the narcissist, and therefore are likely to be members of the coterie, if not lieutenants. And therefore you will need to be careful who you're talking to about your situation, as this information is more than likely being fed back to your narcissist. Those individuals, of course, being brainwashed will hear nothing ill to be said of the narcissist, and I would urge you to listen to a new video called The Coterie to understand more in that regard. What do? I would recommend that you find somebody outside of the social group that you can talk to, a therapist perhaps, a church pastor, a family member, a colleague, somebody who is not involved in knowing your narcissist and is not involved in the group that you have been speaking to. You can talk to them, whether they are a friend or it is in a professional capacity. And in doing so, that will enable you to feel better as you offload about the situation. At the same time, you should be looking to escape this narcissistic relationship, And the key way, as I've described in the early answer to Beth, is that you need to look to go no contact. There are materials that I've written which will assist you with that. So, find somebody you can talk to that you can trust, which is outside of the group that you've been engaging with, and then look to engage no contact and escape your narcissist. The next question comes from Curious from the United Kingdom. Curious writes, I'm really struggling to know the difference between genuine love and love bombing. So what's the difference, and what signs do normal guys do that narcissists don't do in the early days? In essence, as you read more about the narcissistic dynamic and our kind, you will start to recognize those red flags. And I direct you to my book, Red Flag, which will provide you with considerable assistance in that regard. In terms of your dealings with men, you are better served adopting a cautious approach. This might mean that you reject somebody who is genuine, but you have to adopt the mindset that if you repel 5 people and 4 of them are narcissists and 1 is genuine, then it is better to be safe than sorry. Once in a while, a genuine person may get caught up in your net, where you are trying to weed out those that are likely to cause you harm by virtue of being narcissists. Essentially, the narcissist will move at a pace that is unnatural. Trust your gut instinct. A normal gentleman may go on a date with you. He will probably text the next day explaining that he had a pleasant time and he would like to see you again. Don't respond immediately. Wait a couple of hours. If he has not texted in that period of time and then you text, that is a good sign. If, however, he chases you up, having not heard from you, that is a danger signal. Somebody who is mature and adjusted, a healthy individual, will be getting about their lives, going to work, dealing with family, etc. Therefore, 2 hours or 3 hours passing between when they send a text and your reply is not a problem. However, to a narcissist it is. We are important. We want you to respond quickly, but we also want to bind you. We also want to create the illusion and dazzle you and have you spinning around. Consequently, if a narcissist is engaged with you, there will be an over-the-top text. If you don't reply, there will be another one, then another one, then another one. Those are the danger signals. If you feel that you are being hurried, that things are being said to you that don't quite ring true, they will have some plausibility about them. But for example, if you know that you are reasonably good looking, but they keep describing you as being absolutely stunning and a goddess, there is something wrong there. That goes beyond genuine compliments. A lot of this is to do with trusting your gut instinct and knowing that when you're engaging with a narcissist, the love bombing will be over the top. It will be intense. It will be fast. And you can very readily weed that out by slowing it down. Slow down when you next see the person. Slow down when you return the telephone call or the text. If you do that and they respond without being sharp or chasing you or putting you under pressure, that individual is unlikely to be a narcissist. You may also wish to consider at the second date raising certain things which could well flush them out. And I direct you to the 2 videos, Exposed, Tips to Identify a Narcissist. Utilize the information that is there for your assistance. The next question is from Leah from New York in the United States of America. HG, you mention Hoovers often and coming into spheres of influence to initiate one. What if all the execution criteria are met, in addition to being in a sphere of influence, and the Hoover still doesn't happen? Is it because fuel levels are currently high and there is no need? In essence, you will not get a situation whereby the sphere of influence has been affected, so there is a Hoover trigger, and the criteria are met, and there is no Hoover. If there is no Hoover, it means the criteria have not been met in some way. So, for example, you may have sent a text message to your narcissist You have entered the sphere of influence. This activates the Hoover trigger. The narcissist, however, knows that you provide excellent fuel, knows how to contact you because he can easily ring you up, indeed knows where you live. You are not with anybody, and therefore he perceives no obstacle. There was no wounding. So far, the Hoover bar is very low, and it would not take much to meet the criteria so far. However, the narcissist is in a golden period with a new primary source, and therefore does not want to engage with you. And therefore, the fact that all the other criteria points to a Hoover happening, but it doesn't happen, means that there has to be some kind of criteria that has not been met, and the Hoover bar has been raised. In this instance, it is because the narcissist is in a new relationship and is infatuated with the new primary source. Therefore, the criteria has not been met. There is never an occasion where there is a Hoover trigger and all the criteria are met, and there is no Hoover that follows. The next question comes from Celeste. His behaviour was textbook narcissist, as if he watched your videos for a how-to in the early stages. After the first silent treatment and my pathetic begging for answers, I did some digging and found out he used an alias, found his real identity. He was in fact married and had been for at least 18 years, despite him telling me that he never was. Have you ever heard of a narcissist using aliases? Indeed, I have. First of all, I use an alias in terms of the pseudonym for my work. It is quite common for our kind to use an alias. As you know, we operate through deceit. And therefore, if you have an individual that wants to keep one life separate from the other, as we often do through our compartmentalizing behaviors, an alias may well be used for the purposes of trying to throw you off discovering about an alternative source. So it is reasonably common for it to happen. It is probably more indicative of the behavior of a greater or a mid-range narcissist because of the greater level of sophistication that occurs as a consequence of having to do it. Celeste goes on to ask, is it possible that they have a happy marriage and he just has this need to have women on the side constantly? It might be the case that his wife is oblivious to what he does and she thinks that the marriage is happy. It will not be. The simple fact is that if you engage with an individual that conducts affairs, it is highly likely, although not guaranteed, that that individual is a narcissist. It might be that they have narcissistic traits and are not a narcissist, but a lot of the time they will be one of us. The wife will be looking to keep her family unit together. She may have financial reasons. She may know what he's up to, but turns a blind eye to it. She will, of course, be devalued, however, because it is during this devaluation that the narcissist will turn to other sources from the point of view of creating contrast and to gain fuel, but also to look at them as potential new primary sources. It is not the case that they have a happy marriage. That may be portrayed externally as a part of a facade by him, and she may go along with that because she recognizes that she wants to stay in the house, she wants to be there for the children, that she wants the money, many other different reasons, and essentially puts up with the devaluation, which invariably goes on behind closed doors. His need to have women on the side constantly is indicative of his narcissistic behavior, his requirement for fuel, his need to create contrast between the negative fuel from his wife and the positive fuel which comes from those intimate partner secondary sources he's having an affair with. Isha asks, hello, Mr. Tudor. I hope you're well. I would like to know if a narcissist is capable of true love and can they be saved? Written like a true empath, Isha. We are not capable of true love. We do not know what it is. Our view of love is skewed. It is predicated on experiences when we are younger, whereby we did not experience love. We have an understanding of what it is. We are able to emulate how we believe that it should be shown. Indeed, the lesser and mid-range believe they are in love with their intimate partner primary source. They are not. They just think that they are. Of course, our victims, because we are very good at creating the illusion, do believe that this is true love that we are exhibiting towards them. It is not. It is infatuation. It is infatuation with your fuel. That is what we want, either consciously or subconsciously, and as a consequence of that, we portray what appears to be love in order to give you what you think you should deserve and expect, so that you continue to provide us with fuel. Can we be saved? This is, of course, something we rely on, all empaths hoping that we can be saved from being what we are. Experience dictates that so far the answer to that is no. A question from Katie in Minnesota in the United States of America. Dear HG, would I impose a greater narcissistic injury if I kept his last name as mine, or if I went back to my maiden name? I live in a small town and have had my business in his last name for 23 years. In this instance, Katie, you are going to have to balance your desire to wound him as against whether there would be any deleterious impact upon your business by a change of name. Certainly, if you reverted to your maiden name, that would wound him. This would be regarded by him as a criticism. This is because, as a consequence of the narcissistic relationship, he regards you as belonging to him until the day that you die or the day that he dies. This means that you are his property, that you are connected to him, and by having had his name, that is a brand upon you, that you are the property of him. By reverting to your maiden name, you are seeking to throw off the shackles of his control, and therefore, in his mind, this is very much a criticism. He will be wounded, and it will ignite his fury. The next question is from Sharon in Chicago in the United States of America. My question is, are narcissists involved in the swinger community? I thought your kind did not like to share, and would take this as a criticism. My narcissist discarded me soon after my refusal to be a swinger. We were together 7 years. It is correct that we do not like to share, except when we decide that we want to share. Remember, as I have explained in the previous answer, you belong to us. You are our property. Therefore, during seduction, we do not want to share you with anybody. We want you all to ourselves, pumping out that positive fuel just for us, that you bind to us, that you neglect your other relationships so there can be no interference by those people, so our total and hegemonic control of you is absolute. Of course, what often happens is that once the devaluation starts, sex, being a major weapon of seduction, is utilized as part of the devaluation, and, as a consequence, involving you in swinging is one way that that is done. Now, some victims may be perfectly content to go along with that, and in such circumstances, the narcissist would not get negative fuel and therefore may actually resile from wanting that person to go along with the swinging. However, many people would not want to do it. They're honest and decent and place great stock in fidelity, and therefore would refuse. This provides negative fuel. This is what the narcissist wants during devaluation. They will insist on you attending. This will cause you humiliation. They will also, of course, be triangulating you with other people in the swinging group. Those individuals may not be especially empathic, but of course, the narcissist, when he sees you being spit roasted by two men, and the looks on their faces of delight and admiration, feeds the narcissist as well. He is able to say, here, take this object of mine, use it as you will. Aren't I generous? Aren't I magnanimous? And therefore, the response of those two men is fuel through triangulation for the narcissist. Accordingly, where you refused to be a swinger, there were two issues. The first is you were challenging his control of you in a general sense. He did not like this, and as a consequence, it was sufficiently substantial to cause him to discard you. Secondly, by failing to engage in the swinging, you would be denying him fuel in the way that I've described. Negative fuel from him and positive fuel from those that you engage with in the swinging. The cumulative effect of all of this was such that you clearly displeased him on a significant level, criticised him through your refusal to do what he wanted, and therefore you were discarded. The final question for this part comes from Miss Toy, who asks, why does he tell me that he's trying to teach me when he stops talking to me or when he has magical sex with me? He is saying that in order to assert the master and servant dynamic between you. He is the controller, you are the controlled. He is the teacher, you are the student. Accordingly, when he stops talking to you, he is letting you know that he is in charge. And he is underlining this by telling you that he is teaching you. What he wants you to do is ensure that you second guess what his requirements are, that you effectively become telepathic and understand what he wants. His silent treatment when he stops talking to you is a manipulation to draw fuel from you, and will often be done as a consequence of the ignition of his cold fury. What he is wanting you to do is behave in a manner whereby you're not wounding him, so he does not have to respond in that way. Similarly, when he has magical sex with you, his explanation that he is teaching you is there to underline his notion of superiority, to explain to you that you are in effect inferior to him because he is having to teach you things. It is all about asserting control over you and ensuring that you continue to look up to and admire him. This concludes part 3 of the series. Further questions will be answered in part 4 of Ask H.G. Tudor.